Okay, I really am coming up here to talk not as much about my operation as I am about maybe some of the directions that this regenerative ag movement is taking. But as Steve said, you know, I was not raised on the operation that I'm at. I started my own operation about 400 miles away from home, and that was in 2002. And I've lost about 80% of my irrigation capacity since then. So I've had to do some things to adapt, and that's where I think this livestock is, you know, becoming so important. But it's not just the livestock, it's what can we do to our soils to get more productivity out of them with less water. That's what this whole conference is about. And anyway, and I've got hopefully a little bit of exciting news coming down the pipeline on some of this movement that is going on. So I titled my operation "The Future of Regenerative Ag," and what I'm going to try to talk about is, you know, where are we headed? So do I just click this? Do I just click it? Okay. The other day I got to take a nice little trip to the grocery store, and the Saturday before Super Bowl Sunday is not the best day to go to the grocery store and try to be taking pictures, but I did, and all the people that were waiting in line behind me were sure wondering what I was up to. But you know, we're at a time where we have all of these different labels, and there's a lot of greenwashing going on, and I just wanted to, you know, bring some things to our attention. You know, some of these labels mean something. Some of these labels mean nothing. Some of these labels, you know, I'm an ag producer, and I get confused by what they mean. Like, I want to give you all a term. What does grass-fed mean? I bet if I ask 10 different people, I'm going to get 10 different answers. You know, to some people, to me included, grass-fed means the animal has had nothing but grass its entire life. It was not fed grain. To some people, grass-fed means they walk through the grass to get to the bump to eat their corn. You know, I mean, that's just what our deal is. And the grocery store and these companies, you know, they do things to catch our attention. And like, I'm going to just use some examples here. You know, I've got grass-fed, we've got antibiotic-free. You know, to some people, antibiotic-free means they've never had an antibiotic in all their life. And to some people, antibiotic-free means the meat just doesn't test for antibiotics at all. Well, if that's the case, every animal is antibiotic-free because it's illegal to sell an animal during the withdrawal period of an antibiotic. So I just took a picture of some of these labels, and like, here we have all natural. What's all natural? You know, it can mean so many different things. So the things that I did kind of learn by taking some of these pictures is, you know, there's some of these mean a lot, like organic. Organic means a lot. They have a list of rules. They have a list of prohibited substances. They have to be certified. They're checked. You know, if you buy something that says organic, that it's going to be organic. You know, and I was looking at the shrimp, and it has the Seafood Forever seal, and that is third-party certified. So I would feel really comfortable about you know, buying that and it being part of what I'm looking for. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, for me as an ag producer, a lot of this gets really confusing. How confusing do you think it is to a housewife that lives in Dallas that has no ag background to know what does this mean to them? Well, anyway, I'm going to kind of go down this road of talking about this regenerative movement, and anyway, and maybe kind of shed a light on where this is headed. So people care about where their stuff comes from. Even the people that smoke cigarettes and drink beer want their organic, and they want to know where their food came from. So it's not just your health food, right? So I looked up just the definition of what does regenerative mean? Because that's become such a big buzzword, right? Any farm magazine you pick up, you hear about it in medicine, you just hear the word regenerative, regenerative, regenerative. Well, what does that actually mean? Where are we going with that? So we have here, to bring into renewed existence or to generate again. So what does that mean at the farm level? What are we trying to do on our farms with regenerative? And you hear now regenerative agriculture. So what is regenerative agriculture? Again, I think that this is a tough question. I think if I asked everybody here in this room, I would get a different answer of what regenerative agriculture is. I looked up on Wikipedia. Regenerative agriculture is a conservation and rehabilitation approach to food and farming systems. It focuses on topsoil regeneration, increasing biodiversity, improving the water cycle, enhancing ecosystem services, supporting bioequestration, increasing resilience to climate change, and strengthening the health and vitality of farm soil. Like I said, any city person that has no agriculture background at all would totally understand that, right? So that there's many definitions of this. But why is it that's drawing so much interest right now? Why is it that the regenerative movement is actually, I would say, is kind of a hotter topic right now than organic. And I think one of the biggest things is probably that last sentence, because it includes the social considerations for the producers, the farm workers, suppliers, processors, and retailers. The regenerative is kind of including everybody rather than just saying, no, you can't use this, you can't use that. It's trying to be more inclusive. And I think that's what this regenerative labels and stuff, that's what they're going to start doing for us, is they're going to shine a positive light on where we can go with our food supply. But there's several big questions about the regenerative movement. The first one is the one I already kind of hit on. Who's going to define what regenerative agriculture is? And then, how are we going to create a set of standards? Because if we don't even know what it is, how do we create standards for it? Well, I've been to several meetings this winter, and there's a lot of talk going on about this. And I'm going to get into a little more detail here in a minute, but it's here and it's coming, and it's just going to get more and more important, I think, as time goes on. And then my next question. So if we have a regenerative label and we define what it is, well, then who's going to lead the adoption of it? Is it going to be the producers? Is it going to be the suppliers, the retailers? We all need to be working together, but why should I go and get a regenerative label on my farm if I don't have anywhere to sell it that wants that as a label? It's just another expense to me to have an inspection. And if the market's not there, it's not there. Another big question. Are the suppliers going to segregate it? So I just got back from a conference and we heard from Bimbo Bakeries and Unilever. And both of those companies, talked about how they would love to be able to put a regenerative label on their food. The problem is they use so much volume that they cannot get the elevator to segregate the grain. So they know that they're getting some grain that's regenerative, but they get some that's not, and they can't separate that out. So it really doesn't do them any good to pursue that label. But this is something that I think as we go forward in time, it's going to become more and more important, especially as the adoption of this goes further. And then probably the biggest question, especially for us sitting in here, are the farmers and ranchers going to accept it? Are we going to say, okay, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, we want to work with you, Unilever, and we want to provide you the product that you want? And then my last question is, can it become mainstream? I think that these companies, they're feeling a lot of heat. They feel it not just from their customer base. They want to be able to put these labels in the grocery store that say regenerative, because the customer demand is definitely there. But they're also feeling a lot of heat from their shareholders. And that's probably the one that they care about the most. Their shareholders are saying, look, we want to see positive, effects to the environment from the products that you're producing and selling. And what I think could end up happening is, if we get to the point where the demand is so great for this, we might get to the point where it's not just are we going to go regenerative or not? It might be the point where if we want to grow grain or livestock at all and sell it at all, it's better be regenerative. And I know that's a long way down the road, but I think that this is a powerful enough movement to actually get us there. So back to, is the demand there? These are just some headlines that I picked up on, and all of these major companies in our food suppliers are looking into this. And it's a big and up and coming thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these regenerative certifications, because there's multiple ones, and I'm not going to single one out individually. And I really am not. I wouldn't consider myself. I'm not an expert on any of them. I'm just going to give you an overview of kind of what they're trying to do. But probably the biggest difference between them and organic is, instead of having banned substances, they're really more results oriented. So they want to see that you're improving your soil from where you start. So you would start with the baseline, and they want you to improve upon it. And they have different tiers. And as you go through these tiers, you're doing more and more things. And you're trying to basically eliminate the things that are degrading to your soil, and you're trying to improve upon the things that build up your soil. And as you go through these tiers, they don't want you to just stay in one tier. Like there's one called Regenerative, and I think they have 5 tiers. And they don't want you to stay in any tier over 3 years. They want you to be advancing to the next one until you get to the very end of tier 5. And they take into account your environmental concerns, water quality, animal welfare, and even social equality. They want to make sure that you're treating your employees right, and that the trade that you're doing is legit, and they want integrity in it. They base them on the 5 soil health principles, and like I said, we want to try to mitigate the practices that degrade the soil, and minimize what it does to the communities that are around it. In that last statement, I say, really the ultimate goal of all of these programs is no-till organic. And I know what all of y'all are going to say. You're going to say, that is impossible. And I agree, but that's the goal. I didn't say that you have to be no-till organic. I know that. But if we can strive to take these steps that help us to get towards that, that's when we start really seeing that carbon build up in our soil. And that's what these certifications are all about, is the process to get to that goal. And I think that is what makes it kind of unique compared to like just straight organic. So these are 3 of them. The first one is the Regenerative that I mentioned, and that's Gabe Brown's. is who kind of wrote the standards for that, and it's new. It's just kind of coming about, but it's starting to gain some traction. The next one is really more for the organic guys, and it's just the Regenerative Organic Certified, and of course you have to be organic to be in that one. But they both are very similar in that they have different levels and they have different practices you can do to strive to get to certain levels. And then the last one here was just announced this last week. The AEA has their integrity grown, and it's really a standard for cotton. And anyway, basically, I don't know a lot about it. I'm just trying to introduce it to you because it's basically taking these steps to get your soils and the microbial activity in your soil going to where you get to where you're regenerating the soil and not degrading it. So I just put these up. So what are some things that we can do on our farm that help us to get towards that level of truly regenerative system? So one thing that's pretty simple, let's only apply nitrogen to living plants and not apply it to bare soil. That is so detrimental to our microbes to put nitrogen out when there's nothing growing. We can grow mixed species cover crops. We want to try to have that living root as long as we can. We can stop recreational tillage. I know this is a no-till conference, but if we can also limit our chemical inputs, there is a time that targeted tillage is not terrible. We can use more natural fertility. We can use like animal manures and compost extracts. There's a lot of talk about compost extracts. There's been a lot of seed treatments and molasses type products. On pest management, instead of just going out and saying, all right, I'm making a trip across my cotton field, let's just throw some orthene in there for thrips. Let's actually use an IPM approach and make sure that they really have the thrips and they're at a level that's really hurting us. And then another thing we can do, we can buffer a lot of the synthetic inputs that we put out with the carbon source. Humic acid, fulvic acid, you put that with your nitrogen. You put that if you do spray glyphosate or any of your post-emergent chemicals, you can definitely use those carbon sources, and they really help mitigate the impact to your microbes in the soil. And then back to running animals, and we're fixing to talk a lot about this, but you don't want to do set stop grazing. You want to move your animals frequently. The more frequently and the more intense, the better the results you're going to get. And you want to leave 50% of the grass standing after you graze. We using insecticides for parasites such as Ivomec, that kills the dung beetles, which is part of your microbial life, which is helping your soil out, and you really don't want to be using that unless you just absolutely have to. And another thing is stop prophylactic antibiotic use. I know a lot of us run stocker calves in here, and we do these mass treatments with an antibiotic, and what is that doing for our animal health? We're basically not selecting for the hardiest animals anymore. We're just trying to stop one animal that might have a sickness, and we can just do a better job of doing targeted applications that's going to improve the whole ecosystem. Another thing, talking about, we need to manage our birthing periods to fit the animal's natural environment. I've had several people tell me about how they've been struggling to have, because their sheep are having lambs, and it was snowing the other day and they lost a bunch of lambs. And I'm like, okay, why are you having lambs right now anyway? You can keep the rams out let's have the lambs in April or May when the weather warms up. When you're having calves, you can calve in May or April instead of trying to have them in January and February and fight the battles of having to warm everything up and get them out of the snow and get them unfrozen. And that's a management thing. That's not a natural thing. And then the other thing you can do that's real easy is you cull the animals that don't fit your management. If your animals are struggling to have their babies when you want them to have their babies, or breed when you want them to breed, well, that's when you cull them and you take the ones that are doing what you really want them to do. And when you do that, it all of a sudden makes all this other stuff so easy, and you're not forcing the issue with the antibiotics and the insecticides and all of that. So these are just some pictures that I've taken from my farm, through the years. That this is some of the goals that we're trying to do when we get to these regenerative type system. We're improving the microbes in our soil, and like the center picture there is a picture of a wheat plant, and it's got the association with the mycorrhizal fungi, and you have they call them the dreadlock roots. That's what we want. That means your system's working, your microbes are working for you. And like in the top left picture, I plant a lot of my crops green. What that does is that keeps that living root there as long as you can. And everybody says, well, cover crops, they just use way too much water. And I've heard a lot of statements of people saying, well, we can only grow continuous cotton here. That's the only crop that works, or whatever. Well, one of the problems with that is the people aren't giving the cover crops a chance. It has to be part of a system. And the system is, yes, like in that picture, that rye was using water. There's no doubt. But I planted a corn crop there, terminate the rye, and then I start the pivot up. And every time I do this, I can put out about 3 inches, and then I can take my soil probe and I can shove it all the way to the handle. So yes, the cover crop does use the water, but once the cover crop is terminated, the root system that's there, all of a sudden you can drive the water down into the soil. And the savings that you get from the water from that way outweigh whatever water the rye used. But so many people don't ever get to this point to give it that chance. And then the other thing I do a lot is when I'm harvesting, I'm planting. In that bottom left picture, I don't know if y'all can see, the combine is in the background and the drill is in the field. That's how quickly we're trying to get the covers back established. And then over here, these pictures on the right is more cover crop type pictures. So you always want to mix species so you get the root integration. And in the center picture there, that's what your cover crop should look like after you graze it, not before. You want to keep that soil covered. And then in this picture, had a cover crop planted and weeds came up. Well, what do most of us do when it comes up solid pigweed? We go hunt for the sprayer and we want to go take care of them, right? Well, what I'm trying to do now is I turn the goats in on them. So it just takes a different mindset, and if we can get to the point where we start thinking differently and thinking about what are we doing that degrades the soil versus what are we doing that improves our soil and improves our microbes, when we can get that mindset change, that's when things finally start to click for you. Just some more pictures of cover crops with the multi-species, running the animals on it. We get so caught up in our government programs, and we think about crop insurance, and we think about, man, I've got to plant that whole farm to cotton because at least if it gets held out, I'm going to get an insurance check, right? Well, if we can install these cover crops and maybe skip a year and build up our soil, we're going to basically take away some of that reliance upon all these government support programs. And I think if we can get to the point where we do that, you're going to really see a difference on your farm, and you're going to fix this water cycle. And then when you hit those dry periods, you can buffer them a lot better. So what I just noticed a few of these headlines here lately, and I don't know how familiar y'all are with what's been going on in the European Union, but they've been proposing some pretty strict green carbon initiatives, and the farmers have had an uproar. And they've had protests in the streets, and they're blocking traffic. And Sri Lanka, several years ago, they basically outlawed all fertilizers and pesticides and said we're going to all go organic. And it was all coming down with a heavy regulatory hand by the government. And even this last headline here on the right, talking about our dicamba situation, we as farmers, we like our freedom. That's one of the reasons why we're out there. We're out on the land. We feel like we can do what we want. But none of us want that regulatory burden coming from the government. And what I think is when we start to adopt regenerative farming solutions, maybe we can become the source of who the government comes to help us solve a lot of problems. And I feel like we have the ability to address a lot of these issues here on this slide. And I think as a farmer that's concerned about the land and concerned about the environment he's in, I really want to be the solution and not part of the problem. And that's it. Thank y'all.
What's your vision system on the goats?
The goats are a challenge, no doubt about that. I have a permanent fence around the perimeter, and we try as hard as we can with hot wires and fence chargers, and they escape a lot, but it's a struggle. The sheep are a lot easier, and I'm mainly sheep, so.
Hey Kelly, what are some things that you're doing to measure your impact that you're making? You talked a lot about the various levels. Like, what are the metrics or measurements that you're using to determine success?
Okay, I have not really started going down this road on my operation. The biggest thing that I use on my farm is just to measure the aggregation of the soil. And I feel like on some of my farms I've got it driven down about 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches, which I feel is pretty positive. This drought, the last few years in the water situation, I'm running the sheep, and I've been grazing really not been leaving my 50%. I will admit that. So it's been a challenge. But the first thing you really see when you start getting a system cycling is you don't see the yellowing of plants. You start to see a lot more insect activity and a lot more wildlife activity, and you plant wheat or small greens, they stay green all the time, and you didn't put any fertilizer on them, and that's really how I'm measuring. But when they really get into these certification programs, they're going to use like the Haney test and PFL, Chad, how do you say that? PLFA test. Those are the kind of the two big things, and then that's going to kind of set your baseline, and then they want to see you improving on that as you go through those tiers.
So you mentioned goats for killing off invasive or grazing the invasive weed species. You use them because they will digest the seed fully, so they won't spread it through their manure, or will that work with sheep or cattle or other birds or geese or anything?
Right. Yes, it's maybe not as much about processing the seeds like you're thinking, because when your soil starts to change and you start eliminating the free nitrates, your pigweed levels are going to start going down anyway. But the beauty of the goat or the sheep is they will eat plants, and they like plants that cattle do not like. And what really is the ideal thing is to have a system where you have all three of them, sometimes even in the same field. And you need chickens even behind. Now, I'm nowhere near to that level, but that's the thinking, is different animals eat different things. And you just basically, once your soil starts really cycling, and we're going to see a lot of that in these videos that we're going to watch this afternoon. And once you start seeing that cycling going on, that's when the good change really starts to happen.
So you mentioned a lot of people were continuous cotton because that's all that will grow on their farms. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't know really how to respond to that, but one of the things that basically has helped me to simplify the way I think about my farm is to try to think about what was this land like before there were ever people here. You know, we watched the movie about the Dust Bowl. We watched, we read books about history and stuff. And I think we can learn a lot from what the history was. And y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really remember reading about the Indians harvesting the cotton out here on the South Plains. Was that? Did I miss that in a history book or what? So.
But you told me about Charles Goodnow.
Oh yeah. So.
As far as the premier grazing lands.
Oh yeah. So one of the things that I learned, I took a small grazing class one time, and one of the things that they were talking about in that class, and I know y'all are going to be surprised to hear this, but there was a time where the Great Plains of the United States was considered the premier grazing lands of the world. I did not say the United States, I said the world. And we broke it all out and planted wheat and cotton, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, what was this land geared towards? What were the Indians, what were they chasing? They were chasing the buffalo. Why did they like the buffalo so much? Because they could utilize that animal. That was their clothing, that was their food. That's what they made their teepees out of, the hide. And, all I'm saying is the closer we can get to systems that mimic what the buffalo did and the way the Indians did, the happier we're going to be, because things are going to be easy rather than hard. And we're not going to feel like we're forcing everything. And that's the point I'm trying to get. That's what this whole regenerative movement is about. We're not trying to force things. We're trying to work with nature.